All right, and we are back with Ray, and we're going to roll Alan Watt from the top now.
But now they're telling us through predictive programming from official sources what to expect in the very near future. It's interesting, too, that out of all the movies that are getting churned out right now, I think the next 8 or 9 that's coming out at this moment, the first top of them, the first 8 or 9 are all disaster-type movies with martial law and the troops in the streets, rationing, that kind of stuff, and a well-equipped military, a sinister black-clothed military lording it over people. That's also predictive programming, and it falls in, I should say, with the long-term strategy for the next 30 or maybe 40 years of what they have announced from their top think tanks from the military of Britain and the US to do with the coming riots and the coming disasters, etc., etc. But in reality, all planned that way. Planned, and you have to go back through all the treaties and conventions signed on behalf of your countries to the United Nations and with the United Nations towards a sustainable world, as they call it. Sustainable sounds quite nice. It isn't until you go into what they mean that it becomes a horror show, because they talk openly about the necessity of bringing down the entire population of the world into a small portion, maybe 500 million people ideally, to serve the dominant minority. And I'll be back with more about what's coming up after this break. Talking about what's coming up in the future and how really we're being told to prepare ourselves psychologically so we won't be so freaked out when we see troops on the streets and so on. And I'm really talking to the choir here, I'm sure, because we've been following this kind of thing, I'm sure most of you, for years. We've been watching, many of us, from long before 9/11 came along in 2001, and watched the strategies towards totalitarianism, reading the documents about global society, the global village, and so on, where they talked about the necessity to integrate the whole world together, which would mean you could have no dominant powers anymore, but also the necessity to bring down not just the populations, but the standard of living of first world countries, which in the process of coming down would finance the third world countries to come up to a certain standard, and then the first world countries would collapse under all the debt strains and so on. So there's nothing really surprising about the path we're on. It was laid out that way. But then once they gave away, and they worked hard, governments worked hard signing treaties and negotiating different laws into existence, creating the various institutions for free trade across the planet, bringing China in as the most favored nation status country, and paying companies to go offshore to China, factories too, to just simply uproot and go over to China, set up shop, and sending the taxpayers down to pay off any losses incurred by those companies as they set up and started to operate for up to 10 years. Now, this was the planned takedown, you see, of the West. And most people waltzed through that era watching TV and sucking their thumb and having a great old time, never knowing what was going on. Most of them didn't even notice the items all said in the stores, made in China. They did not think any deeper than the price. So we've lived through that whole part, and every economist knows that the country that does the manufacturing becomes the military industrial power. They're the economic power, because through production you get the biggest grab of cash. If you live in a service economy, and that's what the US, Canada, and Europe have been turned into, you're simply buying things and then passing them around from different hands, through hand to hand, to the consumer at the bottom. But you don't get all of the profits from it and all of the taxes you could if you were actually manufacturing it yourself. So therefore, there's nothing surprising about the 30 years or so of riots coming as they take down the U.S. I've always said the U.S. would eventually merge and come into the very system that it helped create across the world, because it was decided long ago the U.S. was to take over from Britain to complete the job. Britain started it with the Empire, the British Empire. They then changed the name to Commonwealth. It sounded much better. And it was to be the nucleus that the United Nations would build on, and the U.S. was to build on and use and basically finance into existence. Now they're so overburdened with debt paying for all this, the U.S. has had its economy pulled from it, and its dollar has plummeted, all by design. When they gave the factories to China and financed the companies to go over to China, they knew all of this. They knew what the effects would be. They knew that a serviced economy is like a dog paddling in a swimming pool. It can only paddle for so long before it can either try and get out or it sinks. Simple as that. That's basic economics. Therefore, getting back to my original point, when we're given documentation from war colleges, like this article I'm going to read, and I already put up the 90-page article from the British Institute that is the think tank for the British and NATO military command. And I've also given up the US one from the Strategic Studies Institute. Well, here's the Strategic Studies Institute also giving out another one, just to make sure we all get the point. And this one is called Known Unknowns, Unconventional Strategic Shocks in Defense Strategy Development. When you read this little summary they put out, and I'll put all the links to their PDFs to get the full story at the end of the show. I'll put it on my website. But when you read this, it's so vague and abstract. And this is what most newspapers, if they even mention it, will put up in their papers. This is what they'll leave you with. It says the current defense team confronted a game-changing strategic shock in its first 8 months in office. The next team would be well advised to expect the same. That means when Obama gets in. Defense-relevant strategic shocks. And they love shock, like shock and awe. It's the end thing. They're buzzwords that become trendy for a little while. It says, these shocks jolt convention to such an extent that they force sudden, unanticipated change. Unanticipated change. I've just mentioned all the things leading up to this. It says, in the Department of Defense's perceptions about threat, vulnerability, and strategic response. Their unanticipated onset forces entire defense enterprise to reorientate and restructure institutions, employ capabilities in unexpected ways, and confront challenges that are fundamentally different than those routinely considered in defense calculations. This is meant to put the average person to sleep. It says the likeliest and most dangerous future shocks will be unconventional. They will not emerge from thunderbolt advances in an opponent's military capabilities. Rather, they will manifest themselves in ways far outside established defensive convention. Most will be non-military in origin and character, and not by definition defensive specific events conducive to the conventional employment of the Department of Defense enterprise. They will arise from an analytical no man's land separating well-considered stock-and-trade defense contingencies and pure defense speculation. Their origin is most likely to be in irregular, catastrophic, and hybrid threats of purpose emerging from hostile design or threats of context. Now, I'm going to skip this hullabaloo nonsense and get to the nitty-gritty of what the PDF contains, because this, as I say, it's like the Bible. It's meant to put you to sleep. And if you stay awake, you'll hit the occasional little bit that jolts you back into reality, the little bit that's worth remembering. So here's the same thing, an analysis from the PDF, obviously, by the Worldwide Tribune, or worldtribune.com it's called. Doomsday, U.S. report warns of strategic shock leading to massive unrest, December 15th, 2008. It says the United States could be sleepwalking into its next crisis, a military report said. The report by the U.S. Army War College Strategic Institute said that a defense community paralyzed by conventional thinking could be unprepared to help the United States cope with a series of unexpected crises that would rival the Al-Qaeda strikes of 2001, termed a strategic shock. The report cited that the prospect of the collapse of a nuclear state leading to massive unrest in the United States widespread civil violence. This is the nitty-gritty. You'll get a little abstract there. Widespread civil violence inside the United States would force the defense establishment to reorientate priorities in extremis to defend basic domestic order and human security. The report authored by retired Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Freer said, it says, deliberate employment of weapons of mass destruction or other catastrophic capabilities, unforeseen economic collapse, remember, loss of functioning political and legal order, purposeful domestic resistance. Now, why would there be purposeful domestic resistance? Resistance to what? Or insurgency. They're talking about basically revolution. Pervasive public health emergencies, that's pandemics and so on, and catastrophic natural and human disasters are all paths to disruptive domestic shock. Titled Known Unknowns, Unconventional Strategic Shocks in Defense Strategy Development, the report warned that the U.S. military and intelligence community remain mired in the past, as well as the need to accommodate government policy. Freer, a former Pentagon official, said that despite the Al-Qaeda surprise in 2001, U.S. defense strategy and planning remain trapped by excessive convention. The current administration confronted a game-changing strategic shock inside its first 8 months in office. The report said the next administration would well advise to expect the same during the course of its first term. Indeed, the odds are very high against any of the challenges routinely at the top of the traditional defense agenda, triggering the next watershed inside the Department of Defense. The report cited the collapse of what Freer termed a large, capable state that results in a nuclear civil war. Such a prospect could lead to uncontrolled weapons of mass destruction, proliferation, as well as a nuclear war. This is from the Department of Defense. I don't know if they've been watching all these movies. I guess they have been, since the Pentagon pays to have these movies made for predictive programming. Says here, the report cited the prospect of a breakdown of order in the United States. Freer said the Pentagon could be suddenly forced to recall troops from abroad to fight domestic unrest. An American government and defense establishment lulled into complacency by a long, secure domestic order would be forced to rapidly divest some or most external security commitments in order to address rapidly expanding human insecurity at home, the report said. That reminds me of when Kissinger was giving his speech at California, when he said that the people of the United States would welcome the United Nations in under the right circumstances. But the report goes on and on and on, and talks about insurgency groups, etc., etc. But basically, it's to do with the breakdown of order inside the United States. And the main culprit would be, apparently, an economic collapse. And we've seen them pull the plug on the economy quite recently. We haven't seen the end of it. This is just the start of the rumbles, in fact, we're going through. And there's much, much more to come. There's going to be one big belly ache in the end. And I'll be back with more after the following break. But now they're telling us, through predictive programming.
All right, so that from Alan Watt. Let me unmute and get my sound fixed here. Are you still with us, Ray?
Yep.
Okay, great. Go ahead then as I adjust my sound levels.
Right. This item you've just heard, 13 minutes long, it does carry on, but I clipped it at 13 minutes because basically it tells you what you need to know is what's going to happen in America, the collapse of the USA, and Senate Bill S 1867, what the real purpose behind it is and why you had 100% turnout is because they've designed and engineered a civil war to basically break out in America. That's why your police now are effectively soldiers and soldiers are police. And that's why the police are getting ready and we've seen all the predictive programming. We've seen Assault on Precinct 13, the remake of it with Samuel L. Jackson, and basically this is, you know, for the public as well as the police to say this is what you can expect. And it's the New World Order basically to bring an end to America and to bring foreign troops onto American soil. Your Marines will be machine gunning down citizens because you don't have a legitimate government. You have a foreign takeover of your government, which are these world bankers, and they're all controlled through the organisation, private organisations like the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, and the United Nations. And your treasonous traitors, Obama, the Bushes, Clintons, and all the guys in the Senate and the Congress have basically sold out because they think they have a place in this new world order. And that's why they're talking about you're going to have insurgency in the USA. And of course, we saw recently the Jesse Ventura conspiracy theory program on the rise of the FEMA police state, and that was broadcast once, and they were very surprised it actually got broadcast. But they usually broadcast these programs about 50 times on the networks, and as soon as it was broadcast, it was pulled. It was removed from the listings, and all the downloads that were done by TiVo and all these remote PVR systems for storing up your episodes that you haven't watched were remotely erased. They did not want you to basically see that video, and that was about the FEMA camps and about the threat fusion centers, 72 threat fusion centers in America that have been built up under the Homeland Security since 9/11, because as we know, you and me know, that 9/11 was an inside job, and anyone that listens to this broadcast and basically understands what the New World Order's about know that it was an inside terrorist job along the same lines as the Nazi Reichstag fire in the 1930s. They basically blew up their own territory in order to basically blame it on a bogus enemy. But the real enemy is the foreign takeover of the USA. And last week I've been talking about Bill Faust, and Bill Faust exposing the scam of the de facto government. And Bill Faust was a representative of the de jure, which basically means the legitimate United States of America, as opposed to the corporate United States of America. And Bill Faust was assassinated, murdered in June this year for basically, it became a threat because he was telling the truth.
Right.
Anything to add, Harry?
Interestingly, since, yeah, I am pretty tired. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Interestingly, since through 1867, personally, I've noticed a couple strong activists vanish from Facebook. And I don't know if you remember, I think I said to you Friday, you know, I said to somebody at Free Think Radio, if they're going to start rounding us up, it'd be smart of them to delete our Facebook pages at the same time. And Pam came to me last night and said there's two people that have vanished. Ask people, their pages are deleted, and it's kind of going on. We should could some this the president yet signal that he would be veto it, but what
Harry, your Skype's breaking up.
Okay. Then. Okay, so what's your take on whether or not Obama might actually veto the legislation?
Um, I don't know. I don't know what the strategy is, but I do know one thing. The end goal is to basically bring this power into basically start snatching people off the streets and taking them from the bed in the middle of the night and for them to just vanish. So I don't know what Obama's going to do, but I do know what the goal is. So read into that what you want.
All right. Well, I mean, how much do you know about what happened in Nazi Germany? I mean, obviously, in this case, those of us who know about the New World Order are the Jews. But I mean, we know first they made them wear the Star of David, rounded them up and put them in the ghettos, and so on. I mean, are there things that you can look back about that situation and say, well, they'll have learned from history and they won't do this or they will do
Yeah.
that differently?
Yeah. Well, I can speak to that. I'm not a historian and I'm not an expert on the New World Order either. I'm just a guy that's finding out about this, and I'm as shocked as anyone else. But what I do know is when they identified their enemy and they marked them, the modern equivalent now is the electronic version, and so people won't be walking around with the Star of David on their jacket. They'll be walking around with their mobile phone with GPS tracking, and they will basically be in a profile in a Pentagon computer with a flag next to them. You know, you're a red flag, you're a yellow flag, you're a green flag, and basically every time this guy's name comes up, all the associations will be looked at, so they can basically widen the net for this eventual. Um, I mean, we're going to see people vanishing one at a time, and people not being able to speak about it. But there will come a point where there'll be a mass roundup, and that roundup will be people like you and me, and anyone else that's actively talking about this. But before they get to people like us, they'll be dealing with the brains behind the fight back, the people that are part of the de jure American Republic, and they've already taken Bill Faust out. They've already assassinated him, and they'll be assassinating leaders, military commanders, and anyone that they deem a real threat.
So probably the sovereigns. I mean, Bill Cooper was a sovereign. Bill
Yeah.
Faust was a sovereign. We know of other sovereigns that have already been assassinated, and certainly they would be the greatest threat, I believe. I mean, will we know when this happens? I mean, what will be the indications?
Well, we're starting to. I mean, a lot of people are expecting this kind of Armageddon situation, and it's not like that at all. We're in the middle of it now, and people are being, you know, taken away under, you know, minor offences being processed. Some people are being sectioned and put in mental institutions because they're deemed paranoid or schizophrenic or whatever. And there are other people that will be picked up on minor violations, and basically their home will be you know, searched, and they'll find, terrorist files, how to make weapons, how to store food, things of that nature. Because part of that bill is anyone with more than 7 days of food will be deemed a terrorist because they're obviously preparing for something. So, they're going to find any excuse to start picking people up, and those that are outspoken, talking about, I'm going to basically start arming myself and digging in, as we know that a lot of the militia are talking like that. Those people are basically going to be picked up and processed. and tortured, I would imagine.
Now, you being over there in England, I mean, you guys can't
Yeah.
even have guns, so you certainly have no militias. What do you think will happen over there? I mean, what are you going to be
Well,
running around with a knife or?
yeah, it's going to be something like that. I mean, the riots are predicted to go off everywhere, as you know. They're going off in Greece and Spain and places like that. And when people don't have guns, they pick up bricks and they pick up stones and they pick up sticks. And when they'll start off with the batons and the electric 50,000 volt electrocution weapons they've got uh, before getting to the guns, and the clashes are going to get bloody, and eventually the police are going to come out with the tear gas and the water cannons, and it's going to escalate and it's going to escalate. And as we saw in the Manchester riots, people were setting cars alight, wheeling objects out into the middle of the street to set fire to things to block the police from being able to move around. So the police are just going to then go to the military option, which is you're going to get soldiers with guns on the street, and then there's going to be curfews, and they're going to be targeting individuals. And we spoke last week about the IXO grid that's been blocked by YouTube, um, and they're going to have this urban battleground that's going to be digitally processed. They're going to be picking the leaders off, and when their followers, and people are going to start getting desperate. And when when the food isn't in the shop, that's going to add a new dynamic to things. That's where things are going to get really serious, and we're going to get mass killings.
Well, in order for them to really make use of the XIO control grid, they're going to have drones. They're going to have military hardware here to actually integrate with it and do anything real in the physical world. Is there any sign that we have? I know in America they talk about, well, we're going to have a couple drones along the Mexican border and stuff like that. And I guess there's a few police forces that have bought a couple, but I don't know of anything in bulk to where, we've got 10 in every city yet that I know of. I mean, is there any sign that's going to pick up?
Well, I don't know if you remember the conversation from a couple of days ago, but I sent a document out to the group about that I got from one of our colleagues about the expansion and the overview of the UAVs, these drones basically, and what they're showing in this 250-page document is where they're at with the current technology, the Global Hawk, the Predator, and the smaller ones, to what's been developed, and what the military are putting their orders in for. So the order books are filling up, and your I can't remember the actual name of all the Northrop Grumman, I think's one of them. BAE, which is the British version, and Boeing and all the other arms manufacturers are all racing ahead, developing their own versions of drones. And I don't know how many drones the military actually own, but there's definitely more than 1,000. And they're going to be starting to bring a lot of these drones home as this civil unrest unfolds. And the factories are basically going to be churning these out like they were in the Second World War, when they were churning aeroplanes and military equipment out. There's going, that's one growth area of production that there is going to be, which is basically the chains for your own enslavement.
Right. Now, most of their military hardware they would use against us, they'll be vehicles, won't they?
You're breaking up again, Harry. Say again.
Maybe I'm not close enough to the mic. Most of the hardware
Okay.
they'll be using against us will be aerial vehicles, if I'm right about that. I mean, don't you think?
Well, aerial vehicles will be a large part of it, but you're going to end up with smart cameras everywhere. I mean, this document that we broadcast last week on the IXO artificial intelligence control grid was about having sensors everywhere, all digitally mapped up to the satellites, to the drones, to the the control centers. Like you say, these portable guard towers that are going up. There's going to be portable control units where they're going to be coordinating all these urban battle plans, and the stuff they're out there doing at the moment in Iraq and Afghanistan is training for coming home to America. Basically they're going to be doing the same stuff in America that they've been doing out there in Iraq, and there's going to be thugs out there that basically don't give a shit because they're not really Americans in the traditional sense of believe in the Republic and the Constitution. These are guys that just basically are mercenaries and will work for the highest pay,
Right.
thinking that they're going to basically be on the winning team. There is no winning team. It's a controlled destruction of humans. This agenda of global depopulation.
Right. And let's remember that, when we're talking about the soldiers, they've been over there, they've been killing people. A lot of them have since found out they were never attacked. And a lot of them have been put on medications, antidepressants, psychotropic drugs to dull their feelings, and they're going to come back home here. Obama announced he's bringing the Iraqi troops home for Christmas or something, and we know they go pretty much straight to the police forces. They're preferred there. So there is a situation here that could be hell on earth in the relatively near future.
Well, it's just one arm of it, Harry, because we're going to have the citizen spies as well, and the citizen army that Obama says is going to be the equal of the military. So I don't know how big the American military is. 1.5 million servicemen, I believe, something with the reserves and that. But from what I understood, is Obama's talking about this citizen army that's going to be as big, and this is all going to be under Homeland Security, and you're going to get people volunteering to be like the town snitch, and thinking he's got some power, and this is going to be just like occupied France, where you got the collaborators with the Nazis, and then you've got the resistance on the other side, which is the legitimate de jure government.
All right, well, one of the most important questions I have, and I don't know if you'd be able to answer it, but I mean, basically, we need a missile program, if not for the chemtrail planes, for these drones. How hard is it to build a missile good enough to take out a drone?
Well, we know you've got surface-to-air missiles, that basically grenade launchers, because America manufactures them, and so do the Russians and all the other arms manufacturers. So it's not going to be a case of building stuff from scratch. It's going to be a case of getting your hands on it. And of course, these are going to be your urban, the mainstream media that's still got control of, the mass mind, is going to be saying, we told you, there's white Al-Qaeda, there's your insurgents, these are your troublemakers. This is why we've had to do all this, is because we knew they were there hiding in the bushes, when in fact, anyone with a bit of logic and common sense can see that this has been engineered, and these so-called insurgents are going to be the people that are not going to give up on their freedom, because they know where it ends. It's slavery and death.
Right. Now, I mean, I imagine that they're going to offer incentives to get people to finally give it up, especially early on. Like, I mean, I mentioned on the broadcast a gift card to turn in somebody. They're
Yeah,
already doing, cash for guns or toys for
yeah.
guns, this kind of stuff. They already do this stuff, and I think they're going to do that. Eventually, it'll be for people, for turning in people and stuff. But I mean, do you think they'll actually go further than that and actually start?
Yeah,
I mean, how far will they go with a reward system? And
yeah.
I mean, how low
Well,
will people
well,
stoop to get that
let, let,
reward?
well, let me just tell you something that you see a film clip or something, and you think to yourself, why am I remembering this? And I remember there was a film called Invasion of the Daleks. I can't remember the exact title, but the Daleks are like this British sci-fi thing with these robots, and they basically they land on Earth and they take over humans. They basically brain chip humans, and they become, soldiers of the Daleks. And people are scattering and running and trying to hide. And one of the
From official sources, what to expect.
All right, folks, bear with us. We're having a little bit of an issue
In
with
the very near
Skype
future.
here. We'll have Ray back as soon as we can. And in the meantime, we're talking about the inevitable collapse of society. It's just another day here at Death to the New World Order. And
It's
also,
interesting
we're
too
discussing
that
these things
out
in the
of all the movies that are
context
getting churned out right now,
of
I think the next 8 or
basically
9
a
that's coming out
Terminator
at this
scenario.
moment, the first top of them, the
As
first 8 or
absurd
9
as
are
it
all
seems,
disaster type movies
Ray
with
believes, and I
martial
think
law
also that
and
it could be the case,
the
that
troops
it
in the
will
streets,
inevitably end up like that.
rationing, that kind of stuff, and a well-equipped
I'm
military,
getting some sound
a
here. I
sinister
don't know why.
black-clothed military lording it over people. That's also
Is that Alan Watt?
predictive programming, and it falls in, I should say, with the long-term strategy for the next 30 or maybe 40 years of what they have announced from their top think tanks from the military of Britain and the US to do with the coming riots and the coming disasters, etc., etc. But in reality, all planned that way. Planned, and you have to go back through all the treaties and conventions signed on behalf of your countries to the United Nations and with the United Nations towards a sustainable world, as they call it. Sustainable sounds quite nice. It isn't until you go into what they mean that it becomes a horror show, because they talk openly about the necessity of bringing down the entire population of the world into a small portion, maybe 500 million people ideally, to serve the dominant minority. And I'll be back with more about what's coming up after this break. Talking about what's coming up in the future and how really we're being told to prepare ourselves psychologically so we won't be so freaked out when we see troops on the streets and so on. And
Well, I'm having major technical difficulties here.
we've been watching many of us from
I don't know where Alan Watt is playing from. Internet connection's gone. They cut off my internet. They've cut the internet. The computer's locking up. I gotta reboot. I think I'm getting hacked, guys. Definitely getting hacked. I'm rebooting.